When you think about the great men and women of the past and the work that has been done in building churches of Christ across this nation and even around the world, you have to be impressed with some of the names that just kind of rise to the top. And I don't know of any two people that you could possibly miss than James A. Harding and David Lipscomb. Give the Campbells and the Stones and all their their credence and their place. Obviously, undoubtedly a great place in the work of restoration history. But these two men have arguably done more, especially in this region in the South, than perhaps any two men. And a lot of it, they've done their preaching, they've done their writing, but I don't know of any more than what they did in education, in helping people to come to be more aware of the Word of God and its prevalence over the creeds of men and the thoughts of the world. And so it's, I do research all the time. This website, therestorationmovement.com, is kind of my hobby, and it's really a place where I can put what I find. And so it's a real practical tool for me. It has grown into a bit of a monster as far as, the sheer expanse of it. But yet it is a place where I can build a book as we go along in life with all the things that I find. And so I started noticing, Wayne and I were in a cemetery down in Athens, Alabama, I guess it's been about a year ago or maybe two now. And we found the grave of one of these young men in this first class at Nashville Bible School in 1891. And so at the time I took the picture, I thought, it's another preacher. Get the picture and move on. But when I go back and I start researching, then I come to realize, wow, and it's almost like I got to take another trip to go back to the grave so that I can stand there and just really kind of, think, wow, what a person and what a commitment that he gave to the cause of Christ. And so that's kind of my mindset and what ultimately became this lecture that I'm doing this morning. So in 1891, when Nashville Bible School begins, David Lipscomb's 60 years old. He was a Tennessean by birth, and he, along with his older brother William, were educated at the old Franklin College under the tutelage of Talbert Fanning, and his wife Charlotte was there, Charlotte Fall. It says, for several decades following graduation, they had an interest in education. But Lipscomb was not really in the classroom so much. It might be argued that when he started editing the Gospel Advocate in 1866 after the war, and the Advocate began again, he was the editor. It might be argued that he entered the classroom there, and that the classroom was actually the homes of people who took the Gospel Advocate, because he was literally teaching a nation of God's people at that time, but he wasn't in a school type setting at that time. But when Talbert Fanning died, March the 3rd, 1874, it was an accident. He got gored by a bull, and a few days later he passed away. Still in the prime of his life, still in education in a great degree. Charlotte was devastated, and within weeks was the close of the session of the school anyway, Franklin College, Hope Institute, and so they closed the doors. So for the next 10 years, there's no school there. But at the suggestion of David Lipscomb, he encouraged, after a time of grief, he encouraged Charlotte Fanning to reopen a school. And so in 1884, exactly 10 years later, she opens Fanning's orphan home school for girls. And she names a board of directors, and David Lipscomb is on the board of directors. In fact, most of the rest of his life, he was the chairman of the board of directors. And so as early as 1884, he is, hands-on in education at that time. But he has a dream of a school. At that time, we have about 3 restoration-related schools in the state of Tennessee. One is at West Tennessee Christian College in Chester County, that later becomes Freed-Hardeman University. Over to the far eastern part, Dr. Josephus Hopwood had a school on Buffalo Creek in Carter County. It was called Buffalo Male and Female Academy, and later it is called Milligan University. But then you've got Burritt College that had started in 1848 down here in Van Buren County, and it went till about 1939. So you got these 3 colleges that are there, but there's no college in Nashville. It's kind of the known as the Athens of the South, and yet we don't have a representation. And so there was this desire to want to have a school. And so we'll get kind of a little bit more into the making of it, but I wanted to give you a little idea about kind of a lead thought that took place the previous year, or previous summer in June or May of 1891. Some things that are said in the Advocate. I think it was J.C. McQuitty that placed this article there. He says that it is desirable to have good Christian college in Nashville will certainly be conceded by all. Nashville deservedly has the title the Athens of the South. While others have the very finest educational facilities here, our people have not a single school in the city under their control. And if we wish to educate our boys and girls, we must send them away from home. Those who desire to educate their sons for the ministry have usually sent them to another state. Is it possible that a great people in a great state and country cannot establish a good school for the education of their sons and daughters? And so he goes on and kind of makes the argument that we need to have a school. And that said, it probably is good for us to consider that at that time, Nashville had quote-unquote Christian education, but it was run by the denominations. We didn't have a school for ourselves. So you had Vanderbilt, run by the Methodists. You had University of Nashville, which was a secular school that Talbot Fanning had actually attended and gotten a law degree from years before. Peabody Normal School was a secular school. It's now part of Vanderbilt. Belmont College, Baptist, was a Baptist academy. Cumberland University, Presbyterian. American Baptist College was an African American school. Fisk University, African American, and Meharry Medical School was a Methodist run African American school. And so here again, Athens of the South, education, but the disciples of Christian churches of Christ, they don't have a Christian education or a Christian institution. And so this is something that he's very, very concerned about. So along these lines, let's think a little bit about James A. Harding. So what I say, Lipscomb's 60 in 1891. James A. Harding is 43. And you might draw kind of a comparison between Alexander Campbell and Barton Stone. There was like a 17-year difference in Harding and Lipscomb, and about, I think, a 16-year difference between Campbell and Stone. And so you see kind of a connection there. But James A. Harding, what makes James A. Harding so special is if anyone was rooted in the history of the Restoration movement, it would have to be James A. Harding. He's born in Winchester, Kentucky, near Lexington. He grew up in a home where he saw Raccoon John Smith and Moses Lard and Campbell and so many people come through his home. So he is very much in it. He went to Bethany College in the fall of 1866. Campbell had died the previous March. And so he goes into Bethany College, graduates, and while he's there, he's decided, teaching's my life pursuit. So when he leaves Bethany, he goes to Hopkinsville, Kentucky, and opens a school there. and fell in love there with a young lady, got married, had a son, Leon, but his wife was very, very weak, and wasn't very, very long after he moved there and started this school and had the successes of it that she passed away. And it really devastated Harding. And so it's an interesting discussion. We don't have time this morning to talk about how he kind of transitions to more of a preacher than an educator, but education was always in his mind. And so when his wife dies, he starts traveling some, and so they end up closing the school. Long story short, closing the school, and he's moving around all over the country preaching. And at that time, probably the most in-demand preacher of the gospel and in the brotherhood. And so it's around this time, spring of 1899, that he's conducting a protracted meeting in Nashville. Went about 8 weeks. They baptized 122 or 3 people in that meeting. But at the end of it, what kind of progressed from that was a debate that took place between he and a Baptist by the name of J.B. Moody. So while he's involved in this debate, he's staying in the home of David and Margaret Lipscomb. And so the Lipscombs are, you talk about places where you'd love to be a fly on the wall. You can imagine the discussions that took place between these two, this older man, this younger man, and they're talking about all the things that they love about the Word and about preaching the Word and about writing about the Word. But you could just hear them talking about, we need to educate. And so David Lipscomb kind of encouraged, we need to have a learning institution right here in Nashville. Well, you got Burt, I know we've got Weston, I know we've got these places, but we need a place of our own. And so Harding's like, I've got so many meetings. He said, I probably won't be able to shake free until 1891. And so they said, all right, 1891, that's when we're going to start our school. And so Harding ends up moving to Nashville, and they end up starting the school. So let me just fast forward a little bit past the beginning of the school to just kind of give you an idea of what Lipscomb has in mind for a school. Because sometimes we think about these schools as being for a particular design, but here's what he says. He says, our effort in a Bible school is to give Bible teaching its true importance in education. He said to train children to be better, truer Christians. We're doing what we believe should be done in training every child, whether he intends to farm or merchandise, preach the gospel or practice medicine, all alike. Need the Bible teaching, need to learn to appreciate religion above all else and to carry the teachings of the Bible into their lives, whatever they do and wherever they go. Every Christian parent ought to seek for every child just such instruction as we try to give at the Bible school. Remember, this is after the first year of school. Every church, every community ought to have a Bible school. And every Christian parent should seek, if possible, a Bible school for every child, girl or boy. Our religion should be earnest, the highest aim, and the only end worth living for. I believe that today. In fact, as far as Lipscomb was concerned, if you went to an institution that didn't offer Bible, it was definitely a pagan type school. I mean, he just really didn't have a lot of appreciation for it. But this also helps us know kind of what his design was for this school. And that was that it's not a preacher's training school, but we'll train preachers. It is to take every child where they are, give them a good general education, but also supplement it, foundationalize it with the teaching of the Word of God. So I think it's important for us to see that this is what he has in mind, what he's envisioning. So, first day, October the 1st, 1891. This is from Lipscomb University's documented history. The first session of the school opened on October 5th, 1891 in a rented house A large, comfortable old brick mansion at 180 Fillmore Street, Nashville, with 9 young men in attendance, all of them except one intending to devote their lives to preaching. Of these, J.D. Gunn, you can see Dan Gunn is there. He's from Tennessee. A.D. Rogers up here, he's from Tennessee. Also, W.M. Taylor. He's over there. Okay. W.M. Taylor, he's from Tennessee, and W.L. Logan is from Tennessee. E.M. Houston and J.H. Jones. There's E.M. Houston. I never could find a photo of Jones, so I've just had to put him up here, but I'm assuming he's somewhere in the picture. And and then John Hayes of Alabama. John Hayes was whose grave we were visiting in Athens, Alabama. That kind of got me on this track. And so on the third day, O.T. Craig of Tennessee entered, and on the fourth, R.L. Whiteside came from, he's from Tennessee, and on the seventh, 6 others. 32 students were enrolled during the session. So school gets started. David and Lipscomb and J.L. Harding start this. They need someone in literature and the languages. And so older brother William is invited to come along and help. So you've got this trio of excellent teachers. When William was graduated from Fanning School, he was brought back in as a teacher. And when in 1855, when the Advocate began, when Talbot Fanning was the editor, his co-editor was William. So it wasn't until 1866 that David takes over. And so you've got quite a powerhouse of educators that are taking place. Harding and Lipscomb had different ideas about teaching. Harding's idea of teaching was the best way to learn is memorization. He wanted his class to memorize the Bible. If you memorize the Bible, you got the Word of God. And but Lipscomb was different. He wasn't real big on memorization. He was more on the idea of just getting the Word of God in your mind. And so he would take the opportunity to really get into the text. And so in the morning, he would go for about an hour of verse by verse study in the Old Testament, and then he spent about 40 minutes of going verse by verse in the New Testament. That was pretty much his Bible teaching for a day. But the students, they worked hard and they made excellent progress. 24 of them were expected to live their lives, as we mentioned, in the ministry of the Word. During vacation the following summer, they all just kind of went out and started preaching. Kind of reminds me back of the day when I was at IBC, but went and preached in various different places. During the summer of 1892, this first summer after school, these men went out and baptized over 200 people. And so already you're seeing good things happen. So basically my breakdown today is going to be state by state. There's a lot of ways I could have done this, but really what I want to do is I want us to look at some of these fellas and kind of see what happened in their lives. I kind of take this lesson. F.D. Shrigley had written a book called Larimore and His Boys, and he talks a little bit about kind of what happened to some of the guys. And in fact, Wayne wrote about one of those boys, J.R. Bradley, who was a great uncle or great uncle? Great uncle was one of Larimore's boys, and so he's written a book. You'll want to get a copy of that book. But so I kind of took on that theme, and I just thought, well, okay, we just call them Lipscomb and his boys, but really it's kind of a devoted opportunity to look at, well, what happened to these first 9 guys that showed up, and I mean, I wish I had time to look at all the 32 that showed up that first year, but I got about 25 minutes, so got to hurry up and get it done. And so one of the things that I found as I went through this, I really saw how these young men were products of the environment that was going on in the Restoration movement at that time. You look at the last decade of Restoration history, specifically in Nashville, you really see some difficult times, some divisions that are taking place unofficially, but officially, as far as each congregation is concerned. You're seeing lines of fellowship being drawn over the missionary society concept, whether congregation, you really see it when the congregations come together as to whether you can bring an instrument of music into the worship service or not. And so you actually see these guys falling down on either side of this process. It's not until 1906 that we see it officially shown in the U.S. Census. But I would say by 1900, it's pretty well settled in Nashville as to which direction the churches are going to go. And so right in the middle of all this, and so from 1891 to 2, 3, 4 years that these guys would have been in school, they're still working through some things. So I'm sure there were a lot of conversations in the dorms, a lot of conversations in the classrooms about what this is right or that is right. And so some, prevailed in a particular area, and some went another area. And so I'm just going to kind of tell you what these first 9 actually did, and that's kind of the nature of my approach here as we go. So first of all, let's talk about James Daniel Gunn. James Daniel Gunn has the distinguished honor of being the first student to apply for admission or entrance into Nashville Bible School. He's born in Nashville, Tennessee in 1873. That's probably the reason why he was able to get there first, because he had the noted honor of being the first student to be sitting on the steps of the school when James A. Harding walks up and is about to open the doors of the school for the first time. So he's sitting there and waiting for Brother Harding to come. Before the morning is over, 8 more join him, and by the end of the first session, of course, 32. Upon completion of Brother Gunn's studies there, he started preaching he was preaching for the Green Street Church of Christ in Nashville. In fact, Gunn, he was an evangelist and, in fact, a church planter. We know of at least 2 congregations that he assisted in their beginning. One was in Cookeville. Another was while he was a student in a mission in Huntsville, at the West Huntsville Cotton Mills Church, which now is known as the West Huntsville Church of Christ. Was started by this young man. So in 1896, his family moves to Smithville, Tennessee, and he served churches in the area, went as far or wide. And back in that time, these guys are traveling a lot of different places, not so much with one congregation, but he traveled as far south as McMinnville on a regular circuit. And so you can see the hill country. Bill, you know about all that area, and it's up and down. Spencer, not too far away.
You have some information about him coming to McMinnville?
I do.
I'd like to have that.
Okay, I'm giving you some right now. But yeah, absolutely. Do have. So he came down in that area. Actually, where you find it, you're going to find reports in the Gospel Advocate. So, these guys are a lot of our representatives of the Advocate when they go out. That's where I found most all this information. So in 1899, his family moves to Sparta, and that's where they spend the next 30 years of their lives. He preaches in kind of northern Tennessee, Jackson County area, and in 1922, he was elected mayor of the city of Sparta. And so for the next couple of years, he's serving as mayor. He's not preaching so much, but after the election in 1925, he began doing a little bit more preaching and teaching. So an opportunity for his family arose for him to move back to his Nashville home, where he went to work at the city comptroller's office. And so on the weekends, he would do his preaching, but his main support was through regular secular work. He always remained good friends with the Nashville Bible School, David Lipscomb College. He'd always come back, and there's some records there about some of the things that he said 50 years later. It's just really neat to find some of those things that these young men said. During the last 20 years of his life, Brother Gunn suffered with advanced pellagra. It was a debilitating disease brought on by lack of niacin. And finally, in 1939, he had to retire. And he had some sons that were living out in Texas, and so he goes and spends the last 6 years of his life out in Texas. He passed away December the 12th, 1945. His body was returned to his home in Nashville, Tennessee, where burial took place at Mount Olivet Cemetery. Never visited Mount Olivet Cemetery. You really need to go there. Go to therestorationmovement.com and click on the master index and look for Mount Olivet. There's a map there, shows you where in the cemetery all the preachers are buried, and I know where all the graves are. So actually, I keep learning about new ones all the time, and Daniel Gunn was another one. Let's talk about Amanal Davis Rogers. Amanal Davis Rogers was born the 9th of October, 1869 in Lebanon, Wilson County, Tennessee. According to family records, he had a grandfather named Emmanuel. And it's assumed that Amanal was kind of the way they said it. Wade and I were talking this morning about the difference between Selma, Alabama and Selmer, Tennessee. Is the guy who went to Selmer, Tennessee spelled it the way everybody says Selma in Alabama. So it's Selmer is spelled the way they, the way it sounds. So I think that's what happened with Amanal, Emmanuel, maybe there, and that's how he got that name. But interesting life. Amanal was the youngest of 10 children, 7 brothers and 3 sisters. His second to oldest brother was Ephraim Hicks, or Red Rogers, born 1850, 1922 he passed. He was a long-time, well-known gospel preacher in Northeast Texas. And I have a website dedicated to E.H. Rogers. But beside the fact that these two men actually married sisters, H. Leo Bowles tells this story about Rogers' family that I think is interesting. It's kind of a side here. That's one of the problems with going down. There's so many rabbit holes, that you could go and learn so many things. But H. Leo Bowles gave us such a blessing in these articles that he put in the Gospel Advocate that were later put in a volume in 1932 called Biographical Sketches of Gospel Preachers. I don't think it's in print, but you can go to my website and click on Books Out of Print, and you can download a PDF of that book. And so he tells us stories about preachers that we never would know otherwise. So get that book. It's just full of interesting information. We come to find out some of the things he might have missed a little bit, but a lot of it was just out of his memory of things he knew about these preachers that otherwise wouldn't have known. But one of the stories he tells about another grandfather of Amanal and Ephraim, E.H. Rogers, was a man by the name of William Rogers. Well, apparently William, he has 5 brothers who are Methodist preachers. And so they were trying to get William to get religion. And for some reason, William couldn't get religion. And so they decided, well, we're just going to go ahead and give him a 6-month trial into the Methodist Church as a member, and hopefully in that 6 months, maybe a little of that influence, he'll get religion. Well, he was frustrated. So he just thought, well, I need to get me a copy of that New Testament they talk about. And so he had some eggs, and he went out and sold a few dozen eggs, and with the proceeds, he went and bought him a New Testament. And of course, Brother Bowles makes a comment, kind of funny side about it. He said, it's interesting how a man's never even seen the New Testament, never read it, but he can be a member of the Methodist Church. But anyway, he's reading through the New Testament. He gets all the way through and he finds, I can't find the word Methodist anywhere in here. And so sure enough, he goes to a gospel meeting in Wilson County, at the old Bellwood Church of Christ, and W.C. Huffman, another man that he mentions, biographical sketches in that book. Brother Huffman, in fact, I passed his grave on the way down here. Brother Huffman was preaching a meeting, and William responded, and he obeyed the gospel. Actually, the Bellwood Church is where another pretty famous gospel preacher grew up, and that was E.A. Elam. And so, but that story, that's kind of how the Rogers got some connection. But Amanal's roommate at Nashville Bible School was another well-known preacher, C.R. Nickel. And here's where it kind of gets interesting. Though born in Tennessee, A.D. Rogers around here. Well, the Rogers had moved out to Texas, and so all they saw was Texas. And so here's an interesting introduction to that. Nichols' biographer, Maud Jones Underwood, reported says that when enrollment was complete, that Charles Nickel, he'd come a few days later, Nickel was assigned to the room with A.D. Rogers, a dyed-in-the-wool Texan. Of course, again, he was Tennessean, but by then he's Texan. So here's their first conversation. So Rogers says, "Where are you from?" And Nichols says, "I'm from Tennessee, sir." With a courteous reply, it says, "Well, I had hoped for a Texan for my roommate," said Rogers. And then Nichols, just that quick, said, "Are you from Texas?" He said, "Yes, sir, I am from Texas." And he said, "Well, I'd hoped to room with somebody from Tennessee." And so this Tennessee, Texas kind of back and forth kind of become their mantra. But they became fast friends, and they were, worked out well there in their time at school together. So after leaving Nashville Bible School, Rogers returns to Texas. In 1893, from Bonham, Texas, a report comes into the Advocate announcing that he's represented the Gospel Advocate when traveling. And some of these students would do that. I'm going to represent, and that's how we get a lot of this information that is sent in. So in 1899, Rogers and his brother E.H. Rogers appear side by side in a portraiture that Ligon's portraiture, maybe you've seen that. They're on row 7, sitting side by side, these list of faithful gospel preachers. And so, however, in 1903, there's another report that appears from the pen of Jesse Parker Sewell. Now, Sewell's got a lot of connection to Tennessee too, but he writes from Dallas, Texas, under the date of May the 12th. Here's his comment. He said, in the Gospel Advocate on May the 7th, this is Brother Sewell. In the Gospel Advocate on May the 7th, I see a report of a meeting by A.D. Rogers in Quinlan, Texas. The writer adds, if any of the brethren will help, we shall be very thankful. He says, I desire, this is Brother Sewell, he says, I desire to say that A.D. Rogers has departed from the faith and now a district evangelist. I suggest that if any of the brethren contemplate helping to build this house of worship, that they learn first for what purpose the house is going to be used. He says, if the brethren who desire to build this house are loyal to Christ, they are certainly endorsing the wrong kind of preaching. So,
What year was that?
That was 1903. So,
I bet it was a society.
oh yeah. Yeah, well, he had become district evangelist for the society, is what he's saying. Fast forward to 1941, Guy in Woods writes about a particular discussion he's about to be involved with. He said, some years ago, discussions with erstwhile brethren of the Christian church on instrumental music and societies were common, but these debates have become more and more infrequent until it is seldom that representative men of that denomination can be induced to defend their practice of his life with the disciples of Christ. He died February 24th, 1951 in Denton, Texas, and he's buried in Roselawn Cemetery there in the greater Dallas-Fort Worth area. William Marcus Taylor. William Marcus Taylor was born in Cave, White County, Tennessee. He was a distant relative of our nation's 12th president, Zachary Taylor. He attended Burritt College in Van Buren County initially, and of course, in October 1st, 1891, he was among the first 9 to show up. He was 29 years old when he arrives. The following summer, he begins preaching. When he finished his course, let's see here. Oh, got the wrong one. When he finished his course there, his education ultimately led him to receive a doctorate where his studies were mainly in the field of biopsychology. Unfortunately, like Rogers, W.M. Taylor cast his lot with the disciples, but briefly he preached in Chattanooga for 7 years. He preached some in Denver, Colorado, and served for a time in the Christian church in Atlanta, Georgia. In concert with his involvement with the Christian Missionary Society, he conducted missionary work in San Juan, Puerto Rico from 1901 to 1903. By 1918, he had left the Christian church and was named pastor of All Souls Unitarian Church in Chattanooga. In 1929, he announced in the Chattanooga Times of an elaborate plan to start a new university in Chattanooga. I had this big, I've seen a picture of this elaborate, huge building. It looked like something you'd see in Bethany, West Virginia, type thing. This new college in the field of biopsychology. Taylor School of Biopsychology was for short psychology dynamics science, and I understand it's short-lived. I never could find anything about that college either. Anyway, he passed from this life June the 18th, 1947. Burial followed in the Forest Hill Cemetery there in Chattanooga. All right, let's talk about William Leon Logan. W.O. Logan was born September the 18th, 1866 in Nashville. And he too appeared on the steps of the Fillmore Street campus that first day, October 5th, 1891. While he was in school, he began preaching successfully in several locations. He ends up in Murfreesboro with a church there. It's about 1905, though, that F.B. Shrigley noted some concern in the pages of the Gospel Advocate that Brother Logan may have some digressive leanings. But he wrote back strongly denying that he had those digressive leanings. He always claimed not to have changed his views on the truth, but he continued to have friendships in both camps through the years. And so we've seen examples of people that did have done that kind of thing in the past, but by and large, that's what happens to him. Perhaps if he had lived long enough, time would have shown more of a commitment as to which way he leaned the strongest. But he died suddenly November the 14th, 1914 in Murfreesboro. His death certificate said that he had myocarditis, inflammation of the heart muscle, often brought on by viral infection. But burial was in the Evergreen Cemetery in Murfreesboro. Well, let's move on from Tennessee out to Texas, and let's talk about E.M. Houston. Eugene Marshall Houston, called him Gene, as he was known. His story is one of joy and sadness, as his life was cut far too short too quickly. He was born in Tennessee, but early in his life, his family moves out to Corsicana, Navarro County, and settles. His father's a doctor. B.F. Houston was his name. 18 years of age, Gene was one of the youngest youngest students to arrive for the first day of school. When he finished his course, he made his way back to Corsicana home, and he and his young wife, Martha, Maddie, as she was called, had one daughter, Eunice Houston Johnson. She was from 1894. She died in 1979. One of his closest friends in school was C.R. Nickel. In fact, when Nickel graduates from the Nashville Bible School, his first work is Corsicana, Texas. So he moves out there and actually lives in the home of Gene's father, Dr. Houston. And so the details on Gene Houston's life pursuits are really kind of scant, and I think probably it's because his life was cut short. He passed away in his 26th year, May the 22nd, 1899. In the pages of the Gospel Advocate is one of the most loving, kind, poetic tributes to his life that I've ever read by the hand of C.R. Nickel. And I just want to share some of the words because it just gets my heart. He says, Brother Nickel says, Yes, dear wife and darling babes of my departed friend, Jesus, the resurrection and the life, had come to triumph over death and the grave. Blessed are they that fall asleep in Jesus. That dear Gene is today pillowing his head upon the bosom of Jesus. We have every cause to believe. Though young in years, he was ripe in the wisdom with which makes us wise unto eternal life. With unfailing devotion, he was ever building a mansion of the rest of the paradise of God. With a jeweled shuttle of time, he was ever weaving in the golden woof of eternity robes of righteousness and the trousseau of saintly purity, that he should be welcomed into the marriage of the Lamb. That Gene was a Christian is enough for us to know. That he is looking back from his home in the Edenic bowers and waiting to become loved ones, or to welcome loved ones to a place among the redeemed of God, should be and is a solace to our bereaved hearts and an incentive to us to press forward to the attainment of the bliss that awaits the reunion of ties severed here. Oh God, pour the oil of consolation in upon the hearts of our dear sister.
He's 12 years old.
No, he's 26. Be thou, O God, a husband to her and a father to her helpless children. Lord of all and Prince of Peace, speed the glorious day when parting shall forever cease and union shall hold eternity's sway. Man, we just don't have writing like that anymore.
But in that picture, he's 12, right?
No, well, I think he's like 13.
Okay.
Yeah, he's 12 or 13. Yeah, just a young fella there. J.H. Jones. Don't know very much about J.H. Jones. J.A. Harding was writing a note in the 1894 edition of the Advocate, and he makes this reference to J.H. Jones. The old students, he said, remember J.H. Jones of Crum, Texas. He is spoken of as most excellent young preacher. I found some references to a couple of articles to J.H. Jones, who was living out in Levelland, West Texas. And then I also found another J.H. Jones writing in the Gospel Advocate telling about some debates in the Dallas-Fort Worth areas. You know, J.H. Jones, it's just really hard to find, who some of these people are. And everybody just kind of went by initials back then. So, that's about all we know about J.H. Jones. But I would suggest that he's probably somewhere in this picture. Okay, we're running out of time. O.L. Traherne is our Kentucky representative, but he too was born in Nashville, Tennessee. And he studies, of course, at Lipscomb there, or Nashville Bible School in 1891. After his studies, he continues to be his studies at the College of the Bible. Moves to Lexington, becomes a student there. He even in 1898 is the editor-in-chief of the school paper, the Transylvanian. 1899, he receives first honors in the College of Liberal Arts and first honors of the College of the Bible. In fact, he presented the valedictory addresses for both colleges. But anyway, he ends up on the Christian church side as well, ends up in Cincinnati, Ohio, and he's working with the Standard Publishing Company and teaching some in schools, but he spends the remainder of his life in Cincinnati. Let me look, because my time is gone. E.V. Mills, Edward Vernon Mills, is from Arkansas. I'm going to put these online so that you can come back and look at them. But E.V. Mills spent his life as a faithful gospel preacher in Arkansas, always a close friend to Nashville Bible School and David Lipscomb College. And there's a beautiful tribute to him that you can find on my Gospel Advocate obituary pages to the life of E.V. Mills. And then last of all, John Hayes. I'll quickly just say, John Hayes, born in Mooresville, Alabama. He went to school. He was one of the original, in fact, one of the first 6 that was there. Later in the day, 3 more comes to the school, and he ends up being a representative of the Advocate, and so he just has report after report after report at just about every little place he goes, and so we have a really good picture of his life, and so he goes out in Texas. He marries twice. His had several children. Some had health issues. He loses several of them in death. Loses both wives in death. Ends up spending most of his life doing traveling. Travels into North Georgia, or in Georgia, and then all the way down into North Florida, and does some work there. He ends up back in Alabama and spends his last years within 15 miles of his home. Benny Lee Fudge, toward the end, sends in reports to the Advocate asking for help, and so from that we kind of see that he was connected to the non-institutional movement toward the end of his life, and he dies in 1959. And so there you have it. You got these various ones. We certainly don't have time to look at all these others, but just a veritable who's who of leadership in the Restoration Movement in the early 20th century can be found in people that you see on this page: R.L. Whiteside, S.P. Pittman, R.H. Bowl, Johnny Dunn, C.R. Nickel, R.C. White, C.E.W. Doris, William J. Bishop, who was missionary to Japan, of course, J.N. Armstrong, his brother Harding's daughter Woodson, their husband and wife, and they end up being part of what is now Harding University, H. Leo Bowles, John T. Lewis, so many more. So thank you so much for listening. I went as fast as I could. So,
R.C. White baptized Clifford Real.